I'm sorry, I'm getting some interesting windows popping up. All right, there we go. All right, well, good morning, everybody. How are you? Good, good, good. Feel free to have your camera on. Oh, good, Jen. I'm glad to hear that. Have your camera on, unmute your mic, ask questions and that. So let me get here and make sure that we can do this. And no, we're not seeing that yet, are we? The state assessment? Oh, we are? Okay. So this is just being a whole lot of fun today. Come on. All right, here we go. How's that? You seen Illinois state assessment? Okay, so I'm Liz Martinez, for those of you who have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, and thank you for being here today and joining us. We're really excited about this. I was a classroom teacher, mostly middle school, but third through freshman in high school for 29 years, and then went to be with IMSA for almost 14 years now. So right up front, I'm going to tell you this. I had to sign, let me get some people in here in the room. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. A legal document says I can share this, but I cannot share that. So up front, I want you to know that there are some things I can answer, some things I can share, and some things I can't. So right up front, letting you know, okay? Okay. So the Illinois State Assessment, little thumbs up, thumbs down. Anybody around for the IMSAT, the old IMSAT test that they used to do? Yeah, right, right, okay. All right, good. So let's move on here. Here's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna take a look at, again, what I can share with you about the test structure and a tool that ISB has for you to use to start making questions that are in a similar fashion, so that number one, the students can get used to taking the test. Will be online again, a test similar to that. Number two, gives you a chance to make some different types of questions that you may or may not have made before that are that fidelity to NGSS. So I am leader of, let's get to this next slide here, for different groups that have been writing this across the state. You can see that there are 4 cohorts across the state. I am part of the one that's held at Lewis University. There's a group of us there. You can see that the teams are comprised of a lead as well as writers. We have educators from all different grade levels, specialties, etc., working on this up through those who teach college. I will tell you that I'm involved in the grade 5 and I have 2 teams that I'm leading. But you will see at 5th and 8th specifically called out earth, life, and physical sciences. But then if you go to grade 11, where the sciences are subdivided into very specific categories, you'll see that earth, life, and physical are also represented there. So why do you really big tests like this? Really, what they're intended to do is to help give us feedback so that that can inform our instruction, right? It also gives us a chance to communicate with our stakeholders. It lets us know as a district, as a school, how we are doing. Those are the intents. You can read the different ones on here. Those are the true intents or purposes of a large scale assessment. So when we're talking about large scale assessment, in this case, we're talking about the test that the entire state will take. It's a very different process than writing for your classroom, or some of you can even develop like a school-wide assessment or district assessment, because geographically, you're in that locale. You know your families, you know the industries, you know what the landscape is like, you know how to relate not just science, but your other courses to the students' lives. But what one student experiences in this part of the state versus another part of the state versus another part of the state. If you look at Illinois, oh my goodness, we're so diverse, right? We have coal mining, we have ag, we have business, we have tech, whether it's ag tech, whether it's what people traditionally think of tech that you would find in Chicago in the city. We have lots of recreation, so lots of tourism. We have a lot of beautiful things in the state of Illinois. So again, quite diverse. I grew up in a town that had a stop sign. You knew everybody who you started out with in kindergarten, unless they moved away, you graduated with, that type of thing. My husband's from the south side of Chicago. So my point of bringing that up is just so diverse. And we didn't grow up that many miles apart. Now I think it just kind of all blends into one another. But we have people in a lot of different situations who had a lot of different experiences. Oh, really, Josh? That's pretty cool. Yeah, like I said, unfortunately, I think it's become suburbia now where I had grown up. So I bring this all up because the AYP, or annual yearly progress, science has not been counted very much. 7% of the AYP is contributed to science. So science does have a weight. I'm not saying that to frighten us as educators. I'm saying that for multiple reasons. We have a true purpose of the test. We have different parts of the state. Science, we talked about this in the last group with K-5 teachers. Science has not always been considered important to teach or have the priority. This, I'm hoping, as a teacher, will start to make science important in many people's eyes, not just in ours, who are biased towards science and understand why it's so critical here. Right. So again, it's quite different writing this assessment for the entire state. So we have a blueprint that we call it that we're using for this, and there are some links throughout here that you're welcome to take some time to peruse through, because all of these links, if you go to the ISB website, it's all public information. All right, not just for teachers, educators, anybody in the state. Well, anybody who has the internet can go ahead and take a look at it. But the original science assessment group for NGSS in our state started, you can see a few years ago there. And testing had not, again, for those few of us, I did it myself with saying IMSAtute, you know how that just didn't truly seem to align with everything, with our old standards necessarily. So with NGSS, three-dimensional teaching, changing what concepts are at the different grade levels, we really need to do the test over again so that it aligns the fidelity of the NGSS. And I will say that what helped get this process going a little bit quicker was there are federal guidelines, and federal monies are tied to that. Our previous state test did not meet those guidelines. So we were told that if you're going to be able to take advantage of these funds, then you need to go ahead and get a test that aligns with it. And obviously testing is important too, to give us that feedback that we need to help inform our instruction. Okay, so let's try to get maybe a little more to the meat here. 5, 8, and 11. Those are the grades in which the science assessments will occur. And content, or the DCIs, the disciplinary core ideas, are not unimportant. They're not unimportant. But the science and engineering practices are unbelievably important. We want to make sure that students can actually do the science portion of it. Roll up their sleeves and do those science and engineering practices. And we want them to be able to apply them, not just in life science, not just in physical science, but earth and space science as well, in all three of those domains. Okay? Some of the questions on the test are going to be three-dimensional, meaning that in a multiple choice or a free response, short response, whatever term you want to use for it, extended response. We need to have an SEP that matches the DCI, that matches the CCC, and we'll go over a concrete example of this, but we need to somehow in a question, make sure that we're testing all three of these things that relate to a certain PE. Wow. It's been, yeah, right? It's been a challenge here. And unlike my experience with some of our previous state tests, physical science, life science, earth, space science are all going to have equal time and equal importance. It's not going to be heavy life sciences or heavy physical sciences, because earth and space science is pretty much the one that was forgotten. And if you look across the country and the state, there aren't necessarily tons of earth science classes taught. Let me see what else is in my notes here. From talking with different people, not just educators, but parents and other community members and stakeholders, what they're looking forward to with this type of testing with NGSS is that they will be able to look at a document, not necessarily a test, but they can look at NGSS and they can know what their students are responsible for, what their children are responsible for, and to help promote that understanding there. And again, we want to try to accurately test what NGSS reflects. Oh, all right. This is a lot of perhaps information. I want you to have a of the wording here because you are probably going to be hearing some of these terms. So we said each of the three domains is going to be assessed, right? At least one question has to have the three dimensions, the SEPs, the DCIs, and the cross-cutting concept. So what we needed to do is we needed to write, you'll hear the word clusters, right? So we needed to write groups of questions. In each cluster, there are 7 questions. 1 through 6 will be a multiple choice. Number 7 will be the free response, like we said, short answer, whatever term you use there. And again, I think oftentimes what we're using for ELA kind of dictates what word our district or school is using to have that consistency there. All right, so it says here that something about basing it on a problem or phenomena. Those of you who use phenomena to teach, you know it takes a while to find the right one. You know it takes several experiences and it takes more than a timed test to be able to implement that, right? So for those of you who are really phenomena based, you might not see these as full phenomena because we have 7 questions and we have a short amount of time for the students to read that, look at graphs, pictures, other types of illustrations, graphics that are there, read the questions, read the answers, respond, and get through 7 of them. So that is why I just bring that up. It will probably look more like a scenario or a stimulus, right? So get a little bit of information and then that information will be added to perhaps throughout the questioning session. So, as I said, multiple choice, and then the one where it's written out. So very quickly then, let's move on here. Again, with a true 3-dimensional assessment, we're incorporating all those things. We've talked about that a lot. And truly best way to do this is those things that are listed there. Those are some of the best ways to do this. Obviously, you can do this in your classroom, right? We can do these in our classroom. We might be able to do it in our building. We might be able to do it district-wide. But trying to do those statewide, that would be ideal. And we all wish we could do it, but that part's not going to be a reality. We have to be able to do it on the computer. The availability to print it out, etc., to meet the needs of your students will occur as well. Okay. So kind of dovetailing into what I said before, here are some of the concerns or what you might call problems with our state assessment. We have to still use a multiple choice A, B, C, D. You can't have two answers that are correct. You can't have a not. You can't have these other types of things. Okay. Often the questions will be 2-dimension out of the 3. Because again, just the questions get um, more complex, they get a bit wordier, so we had to be cognizant of the time. We had to be cognizant of being able to truly test, not reading ability, but the ability for the science. And you can see a couple of others there too. There's a test anxiety and test fatigue as you're going through things. And again, another logistical constraint that I mentioned before is this has to be able to be printed out in black and white. So therefore, some of the illustrations, the graphics you'll see, yes, they would have been great in color, but that's just not practical with our state assessment. Okay, so we've already said this before. There's going to be one correct answer and what we call 3 distractors for each of the questions that are multiple choice, 1 through 6. So you have these clusters that I talked about before. We picked 2 to 3 PEs to write about, to combine here. And one cluster will have the 7 questions. Then there's like a mirrored cluster. So you have 14 questions total, but question 1 from this cluster mirrors question 1 from this other cluster. They're compatible. Right? So it helps to build a test bank, if you will. Some of you have test generators that you can use, and there's more than one way. You can say you want this question asked version A, version B, version C. So that helps out with that. So that's what that super cluster is. So again, not to be too wordy here, but you might hear the words clusters and super clusters. Let you know that. So I'll put it out there. Okay, so how did we put these things together? And this is what that ISB site that we'll show in just a minute called Quizbee can help you do. We first of all had to pick the PEs that went together, that we chose to write together. Okay, we had to take a look, as we said, at all 3 dimensions of it. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention is the intent of the writers, the authors of NGSS, was that in my classroom, let's say that for this particular PE, it was best for my students to design and carry out an investigation. Because maybe we have the resources for it. Maybe it's really, really, really important for our community. So there was flexibility in the SAP that I could use, a cross-cutting concept. The way it is written in the document now, because it's a standardized test, if it's said to computational mathematical thinking, that's SAP we have to use. If it said patterns for the CCC, those the patterns would be what we need to use. So if you look at the document, the way that it is written, you will find out very specifically what needed to be combined to develop a cluster for that PE or those PEs. So that flexibility that was intent of the document and intent for employing NGSS in our classrooms has to be rolled back a bit to have that standardized test. So again, that last bullet about some are going to be 2D, some are going to be 3D. Also, too, just a word here is that go along with the flexibility that you have in your classroom to change up the CCCs, to change up the SCPs, and to combine the PEs in a lot of different ways. You may have gone into greater detail, maybe got to that PE, but your students are ready for more complexity, or because of the community that you have, you needed to take it down a little bit different route. Please remember that NGSS PEs are the base. That's the base. That's what we need to test. But again, your students might have had a little bit different experience. As I said, it's been appropriate for you to go into some more detail there, particularly those of you who teach middle school, because you have to decide what you're going to teach where. So that's why they're testing in 8th grade as well. Okay, so let's take a look here. In this example, these are the 2 PEs that are chosen for this example. Okay, so test this. Questions have to cover for this PE PS 4-1, we have to talk about wave properties, specifically this part right here. That has to be tested, and students have to have a chance to reflect where they are in their understanding of that. We have to tie this into a question with using the mathematical and computational thinking here. We have to tie this into a question with patterns. That's the minimum. That would be 2D if I just did the DCI and the cross-cutting, the SEP, and the DCI. Questions, though, that are three-dimensional are going to take all three of these. But I can't have that so segregated that it doesn't fit here. Some of you might have looked into bundles on the Chi website. This is what we're doing here, is bundling. So in addition to those questions, I have to do something with developing and using models that goes along with all of this information, this DCI or content information that we used to call it. I will also do something with this and developing models. I'll do something with this in science and engineering practices. Okay, so let's take perhaps a little bit different look at it. I don't know how well you can see this. Can you read any of this? I know it's pretty tiny, the writing. Yes, no? Yeah, so. All right, so these were just left blank because this is a template. Let's go to question number 7, the free response that is going to have those 3 dimensions in it. So we looked at the DCI, made sure that we had written that down. This is just for planning, and this works for some people. For some people, it's not the best. Then we decided that this SEP, the developing and using models, would be the SEP that we use. And then we're going to take that cross-cutting concept of structure and function. So we had the ability to choose not the content or the DCI, but which of those 2 SEPs we were going to use, because remember, they were different, and which of the cross-cutting concepts, because those were different, we were going to use in this last question. Okay, so those are the kind of things that we have to think about. It's kind of our roadmap, if you will. Another way to look at it is we kind of did this. All right, so you can see these first 3 questions are paired with a science and engineering practice, but we are missing it right here, right? So then some other questions needed to be developed where we had these 2 cross-cutting concepts that are mentioned in these PEs and needed for those PEs. So I feel I'm being very wordy, but I'm trying to somewhat explain, because you'll hear about the 2D questions, the 3D questions. So if only 2 of these boxes are filled in here, or questions 4 and 5, the 2-dimensional question. You can see that 6 and 7, there's information for all of those. That would be considered your 3-dimensional questions. Okay. Right. Now, one of the things that we want to do, and in NGSS and science, we got the opportunity to take kind of a watch how Common Core was put together. And one of the things that, if you look at the mathematical practices, what I really appreciate about those and what Common Core did is they gave a standard list of words to use so that we're all speaking the same language. So for example, developing and using models was one of the science and engineering practices from that last example. If you take a look at what this means at that age on the left-hand side, you can see these are the tasks that would need to be completed. So how do we convert that into a question? So there are all sorts of sources for question stems, and they are listed in the resource page too, right? But try to use the word model, diagram. Try to use the word relationship. You can see there, revise, etc. So use that language, because if we have a set language that we're talking with our students and among ourselves as colleagues, there's less confusion. And NSTA has a lot of these things as well. So one of the things I want to point out, one of these sites right here, and I'm just a little concerned about going there. I will try to come back to that just because my internet's being kind of wonky there. But if you go to STEM teaching tools, I suggest that you do. It has articles that are maybe 1 to 2 pages long. And in particular, we have some good ones about questions that you could ask if you are trying to evaluate there's a great one on cross-cutting concepts. And it's just been very helpful to me in writing my individual assessments as well as working on this project. So please, please, please use those. And then of course we have the Achieve document, the framework. So anything in there is very helpful too. But please check out STEM Teaching Tools. I think it's stemteachingtools.org. I just want to make sure there. Yep. All right, so here's a more of that do this, don't do that kind of thing. You can see we've already talked about the first one. Alluded to the second point a bit. Please know that we have not only the science experts, I'll say, that are working on writing these clusters, but we also have somebody who does our graphics because they have to all be original graphics, original graphs. So we have somebody who does that and is really, really good at making them concise and deliberate so it can't like sidetrack you. It has it really focused. The other people that we have working on this is taking a look at cultural bias, geographic bias, gender bias, as well as going back to ELA, vocabulary, sentence structure, even the flow if there are 2 or 3 sentences, making sure that it's accessible for our students, right? And again, the one thing that has been difficult, I'll be honest, is we can't say which one of these, is not like the other. We can't put the word not in there. We can't have anything that's like a never, all of these, but never that kind of thing. Okay. And trying to make it concise as well. Okay. The distractors, you don't want those obvious. It says, like I'm going to the grocery store to pick up some milk. When it was a question about life cycle or something like that. You can't be that obvious with your distractors. So again, some of the things on the left-hand side here that I want to point out to you, there's this site Quizbee, and we'll take a look at a couple of slides about that. But you can create those online assessments, and I'll just show you a sample of one that I made. However, a few things are different here. First of all, I want to make sure to stress that if you're a 5th grade teacher, an 8th grade teacher, or a high school teacher, these are the people that these are being granted access to Quizbee. I had to ask for permission to be able to use it, to be admitted into the system since I'm no longer a classroom teacher. But if you are 5th, 8th, or high school teacher and you don't have access to it, you can't register yourself. You need to go to, depending upon the title within your district, someone who's like an assessment coordinator, an assessment director, maybe the person who works with the state testing, getting your school registered, might be a science chair or something like that. But talk to that person and they can get you admitted to the system. They can get you admitted so that they can get you registered. Because again, you and I can't do that. Right. And again, if you just go on to ISBE and Google the Illinois State Assessment, it'll take you to the portion. We'll take a look at it in just a minute. The other thing that's different, but really good for the students, and I found it really good for myself to make sure that I was getting closer to writing authentic 2D and 3D type questions, is look at the list of possibilities you have here, right? You have a lot of things that, again, with the ISA for the state, we have multiple choice, but you have all sorts of things here that can fit different learning styles, can help you evaluate so you can inform your instruction, where they are in the process of their understanding. You can follow that line of thinking in a lot of these. The images are super easy to add, as well as the video. I've not messed around yet with the audio portion, but I'm sure that that's fairly easy too. Again, different types of things that you can do that we cannot do, but cannot stress enough, if you can't get into the system, contact that assessment person. If you are the assessment person and you've registered your school, but you're not quite sure about Quizbee, talk to the people that you registered with and they can help you get that information that you need. And again, the experience of taking that test online is really, really good. So get used to it. All right, so I'm at the State Board of Ed website. And if I scroll go down ISA, I get all of these choices on the left-hand side. It's on the left-hand side of the screen, but it's in the center of the screen on the ISB website. So you can see these different types of things here. There are a lot of PowerPoints. There are a lot of recorded webinars that have been helpful for me to learn more about this and keep up to date. For those of you who are involved in setting up the testing and getting everything set with IT, or maybe you are the lead science teacher, the assessment coordinator, and the IT person all rolled into one. There's a lot of good information about what kind of tech do you need, what kind of programs do you need, and there's some really great support lines too. So make sure that you take advantage of all of this that's here. All right, so we want to go with what we're going to talk about now to the QuizBee formative assessment platform, which is down below. When you click on that, you'll get that insert picture there, and you can see all these different things. So be quiet and let you take a minute there to see if they're what might be of use to you. And you know what? Even if I'm not an administrator, I can still watch those recorded webinars or access the PowerPoints. So again, some really, really good information there. Here's where I went when I went to use a system. I thought, okay, let me try to pull two PEs together. So I thought these with forces and interactions complemented one another. We're getting into the third law that Newton had and taking a look at some evidence. We're going to collect some evidence again to help us with change in an object's motion. So I just put these, we don't have to read them. I just made them a little bit bigger because I don't know about your eyes, but my eyes when they were put side by side were kind of tough to see. But you can see again, we have the PE up there, and we want to make sure that we stay true to the PE. But I can have a question about the explanations and solutions, something with systems and system models, and then obviously this content that's listed there with DCIs. So again, this is just to see it a little bit bigger and larger. And please, 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 these are so helpful. What I had to do then is once I decided these are the two PEs I want to combine, and let me make it clear, this is for my personal use, this was not for the project. But go to the evidence statements. Spend some time reading those. And there will be little pieces that you can pull out that will help you formulate your ideas for the questions. It will also make sure that you're staying aligned to the intent of that PE and to NGSS. And once again, I cannot reiterate enough that the science and engineering practices are super important. So I did that for this example. And then this is what QuizBee looks like when you get there, except you don't have any sample assessments in there. Those were two that I added. The tutorials that they have along the left-hand side are very helpful and very well done. And they're in what I would say is small bites instead of giving you everything at one time, so it's not overwhelming. So I just threw a couple in here, and the one on the left there that just says physical sciences sample assessment with the little kind of purple, I don't know if that kind of looks like a rocket to me. That's just a generic picture that you'll get. But then on the right-hand side with bumper cars, that's one that I uploaded. So you can do that, as we said before, with images, videos, and things like that. So I picked the bumper car because we're getting into motion and trying to figure out what's going to happen and be able to apply that. So this is just one question. What do you think a distractor might be? Is there a word or two that you see that might help? Let me get my chat box further up there. Oh. Yep. color, and weather. You are right. What do you notice is the same no matter which question you look at? Yep. And that STEM, how does, and then I tried to put the variable in there, mass, speed, color, weather. And then the rest of the question should be the same unless I made an error. So I always need somebody to double check and edit for me. Okay. Now, if you would please go back up to the little prompt. When I said there might be a science and engineering problem that you put in or phenomenon that you put in, it might look something like this. Oh, yes, I do. Hang on, Josh, I have a list of things to do. See? Thank you. Yes, I definitely will. Take a look at the question that's asked above, like in that little scenario. What can I do in this program that I could not do on the state assessment? Look at the word question. Is it singular or is it plural at the top? Or it says, which of the following questions would be best to investigate? I can do that when I write these in this quiz bee, but you will see question, you will see singular on the state assessment, and then only one of those would be correct. Okay. And then let me just check my notes here. What I like about quiz bee is going back to our discussion earlier about in the classroom, you know what you taught, you know what you want to assess your students on. And we said that NGSS as it's written is the baseline, and you might be higher than the baseline, and that's fine within your classroom. You might have stressed a different SEP, a different CCC, and that's fine. So you can tailor these questions here to fit your classroom. Because again, assessment is to not only inform our instruction, but it also helps students, if we can get them to that point of understanding that that helps them realize, all right, I'm doing really well here. This is where I'm struggling a bit. And so this might be an area that I really need assistance with. But we necessarily haven't done that in education, right? I need that 92% or something like that, but not going back and reflecting. So we want to make sure we do that. So I am going to go here and stop sharing. That's a lot of chit chat for me. Sorry. Questions that you have, feel free to unmute. Or drop it in the chat box.
I have a question.
Please, Janet.
Okay, so our district does iQuest, which is like a 6, 7, 8 curriculum. And there is an earth science, but we found when we were originally looking at the NGSS that earth science wasn't really too much of a super big portion as much as it had been in the past with the state testing. So now is it because we actually don't have an earth science. We do physical life and chemistry. So is it now your belief that the middle schools need to start putting more earth science back into, because it is going to be a focus on the state testing?
My opinion would be yes. Let me ask you a question first, because I was in mostly middle school, as I said earlier. Did you do prior to this, before doing iQuest, did you do like a year of physical science, a year of life science, and a year of earth science? Okay. All right. I will say that integrating them like iQuest does is better because it's not siloed so much, because life and science are not siloed. You know the clusters that we talked about? You
It's just difficult.
Yes,
Because we,
make sure you get to the earth science.
okay, because we have not, our district did not invest at all in that set of books from iQuest. So we only have